Hello everybody and welcome to On Topic Retro Microsode number 2. So this is a special little microsode because I had recording issues recording the full episode of On Topic Retro last Wednesday. Recorded the whole show with my guests, my poor guests, and the audio was unusable. So I'm going to have to postpone the show until next week. We're going to try again and record locally, so hopefully we'll have some better luck with that show. So I decided that I would just record another microsode. I had one kind of in the hopper, a special game that I've been wanting to play, and one that I polled the community on to see what they wanted me to play. I gave some choices. Let's see, I think I gave a choice between Solomon's Club Golf for the Game Boy. These are all Game Boy games, by the way. Wario's Blast, or what was the other one? There was Donkey Kong 94. And the community has spoken, and the game that came in first with the most votes was Wario's Blast. I didn't really have like an official cutoff time, but I'd left it up there for close to a week. So I figure, or maybe even more than a week. And I got just a few votes on each one. The Wario's Blast won out in the end, and I'm just as happy to talk about Wario's Blast as I am any of the other selections that I gave. This game, I don't have a whole lot of experience with it as a child. I didn't own Wario's Blast. But once I found out about it, later in life, I made sure I picked up a copy because I love Bomberman games. I've been playing Bomberman since Super Bomberman on the Super Nintendo. I had some, some buddies that would come over, and we would rent a copy of Super Bomberman. I've never owned a copy of Super Bomberman, but I've rented it enough times that I probably could have bought it 4 or 5 times, even at the new, MSRP price back in the 90s. And we would play this game all night, multiplayer. That's really where Bomberman shines. It's a great multiplayer experience. There's no lack of laughter and shenanigans that goes on with Bomberman. There's so many different ways to win, different strategies. All your power-ups and items are luck of the draw. So really, there's no game that happens the same twice. With that being said, I decided that a little bit ago that I was going to play through these 4 games, regardless of which one was going to win, at different times, so that I could do all 4 of these games, and I'll just go through them. You guys have kind of given me the order in which I will play these games and talk about them on microsodes of On Topic Retro. But so with Wario's Blast, I played a little bit last week and I played a little bit today, and I've played most of the way through the game. I have beaten the game before, but I wanted some more recent experience. There's not a whole lot to Wario's Blast. It's basically just Bomberman with Wario in it. Plays very similar, which I'll get into more of gameplay and things later in the show. But we'll go ahead and get into game discussion now that I'm done with my experiences and I've lost my place, so we'll just move on. So, just a little bit of a game overview. The game's full name is Wario Blast, featuring Bomberman. This game was developed by Hudson Soft. It released in '94 for the US and Japan, and '95 in Europe for the Game Boy. Technically, this game is a reskin of Bomberman GB in Japan. So, but in Japan, Wario was not attached to the game. That's something that it was only done for the Western releases, I believe. So Wario only appears in the US and Europe. And I was doing some digging and found out that originally Mario was considered to be the character that they wanted, the Nintendo character that they wanted to add to this Bomberman game. But Nintendo had some concerns about Mario using bombs and how he'd be portrayed using bombs to take out enemies. Even though, I think in Mario 2 you could probably use the bombs to kill enemies. I can't remember, but I imagine that's how that works. So it just kind of was funny, Nintendo being safe with their characters. They're a lot like Disney, I'm sure. Even Nintendo giving Wario to Hudson Soft there was probably a list of things that weren't allowed and a very small list of things that were allowed to happen. And although this is a Game Boy game, I'm sure there was lists. I mean, there's not a whole lot of things that would portray very easily on Game Boy. I mean, you basically get a sprite of Wario, and that sums up the Nintendo portion of Wario Blast. It's just strictly a reskin of Bomberman for the Game Boy. But there was some cool things that I did also find out, because I actually haven't tried this. I haven't put my copy of Wario Blast in the Super Game Boy, but it obviously gets a nice border and a nice color palette added to it when you do so. But not only that, it gives you the option to play multiplayer, which is something with the Game Boy you had to have the link-up cables, and I don't think I've ever attempted to play Wario Blast multiplayer on Game Boy with the link cables, but you could very easily play at least a 2-player mode on Super Game Boy. There's also the option for additional multiplayer of up to 4 players if you have you have to have the Super Multi-Tap to play 4 players, which, again, I don't know. I guess I should have researched this. I didn't think about it, but because I know the Game Boy link cables, there's a adapter that allows you to play 4-player Game Boy games. I'm not sure if 4 players are allowed on Game Boy hardware, but you can definitely play 4 players with the multi-tap on the Super Nintendo. There's also a secret game mode called The Battle that was never revealed in-game and can only be accessed using game guides. And in this is kind of like a endless score attack mode where there's just like an infinite amount of enemies and you're just competing for a high score, which is kind of neat, but Bomberman's game loop doesn't really lend to an infinite mode. I mean, I guess it kind of does, but I think you would get bored of it a little quickly. The piece that I seen that mentioned this also gives the password, since Wario Blast runs off a password system for all of its saves. The password 6565 will let you play as Wario in the battle mode. So I thought that was kind of funny. I didn't try that out today, but I'll put the password in and play a little bit of the battle mode after I get done recording this. But that's the game overview. I can't think of anything else that I'd like to add to that, so let's move on to the story. The rich story of Wario Blast. So the story of Wario Blast, it's not as rich as I alluded to before. Wario invades the land of the Mad Bombers. Wario, in his constant search for new lands to conquer and treasures to gain, has found the extra-dimensional portal that links his world to the one of Bomberman inhabitants. Thinking the Mad Bombers will make a nice addition to his legions of mindless minions, as well as a new source of funds for his nefarious schemes, Wario steps through the gate and soon finds that the Mad Bombers are not quite as dim-witted flunkies as he originally thought them to be. That's an insert straight from the instruction booklet. That's, like I said, it's not a very rich story. Basically just Wario being Wario. He's greedy. He's trying to find a new world to take over, new minions to take over their minds, and then more money. It's always about the money. Which is kind of funny because in the game you can either play as Wario or Bomberman, which essentially makes, well, I guess if you're playing as Wario, your goal is to conquer the Bomberman world. And if you're playing as Bomberman, your goal is to save the Bomberman world. So I guess you kind of get like two stories, even though there's really no story. But you could choose between the two if you'd like. With the story out of the way, I guess we'll move on to some gameplay. The gameplay of this game is pretty much like any other Bomberman game that you've played. If you've ever played Bomberman, I can explain Bomberman a little bit for any uninitiated. Bomberman's a pretty basic game. You play on a grid, and there are blocks that are destructible, and there are blocks that are not destructible. So I guess indestructible. And you start out with one bomb, and the nice part about it being on a grid is you learn very quickly that your bomb's explosion, for one, goes in a cross if allowed. So if it's in an open area where there's a cross, where the explosion can go across horizontally and vertically, it will do so. If it's obstructed by an indestructible block, it will cause the explosion to just go in two directions instead of four. But as I was saying, with the grid, your bombs have different power as you get more power-ups. And the more power-ups you have, the stronger your bomb is, and the more spaces on the grid your explosion will take up. So, if you get good and you learn that each power-up gives you so many additional spaces that your explosion takes up on the grid, this becomes very important because your bombs can hurt you as well. So when you're placing your bombs, you want to know what kind of blast radius you have to get safe up from the bomb. And you can also kind of learn your enemy's bombs too if your match lasts long enough. A lot of times with computer opponents, it's not as critical because you can usually take them out pretty easily. But when you're playing multiplayer Bomberman, it's usually kind of a good idea to keep an eye on how strong your opponent's bombs are as well. That, those things kind of come in strategically later in the match to help you know if you have time to get away from the blast or not, or if you need to cut a corner to get behind an indestructible wall. But that being said, that's the basics of Bomberman. You basically are just trying to take out the other opponent with your bombs, usually like 1 to 3 extra guys on the map. Later games let you play like up to 8 players. Like I think Bomberman R on the Switch is an 8-player game, if I remember right. But with this game, you could choose between Wario and Bomberman. In the Japanese one, you can only play as Bomberman because, like I said earlier, Wario was not in that game. There are 8 worlds and 4 stages per world. This is just in this game. It's not always the case in all Bombermans, although they're usually separated by stages and worlds. I can't remember how many worlds are in Super Bomberman offhand. It's been so long since I played through it. But, excuse me, stage 4 of each world is a boss in this game, and a lot of the later games as well. And your power-ups, as I was mentioning earlier, are kind of limited in this game, even though this game came out later. There had already been Super Bomberman and maybe Super Bomberman 2 by the time this game comes out. But in this game, your only power-ups that are available to you are that you can pick up on the map are firepower increase and extra bombs. You can also pick up the skull. That's not really a power-up. It usually ends up... The skull's kind of hard to explain because I don't know the full ins and outs of the skull. This is what I know what they do. Like, it's random. So you can have a random effect where it can make you walk really slow. It can make you to where you can't put a bomb down. In some games, it can make it to where you automatically put a bomb down when you don't anticipate it. So the skull is very bad. It can make you do all kinds of crazy things. Sometimes it can make your bombs go full power out of nowhere, like you're not expecting. You pick up the skull and you hadn't picked up any other power-ups yet, and you might have the strongest bomb available on the map just by picking up the skull. And also in this game, they wear off. In some Bomberman games, they don't wear off, and the only way you can get rid of the skull is to run into another player with it, and it will transfer the skull's abilities to that player that you touch. So, yeah, as far as item pickups on the map, this game's pretty lacking just with those three. Later games would incorporate like speed shoes and some different, like roller skates, to allow you to travel faster. And the more you play this game, the more I kind of think I figured out why they don't have all those things. Because as you defeat some of the bosses in the game, later on down the road, you start to win power-ups that are permanent, that you don't have to pick up in the arena anymore. So in World 1, which is the Cup King, is the boss. You defeat him, you get Kick, which Kick allows you to kick a bomb across the map. Like basically, if you just run into it, Bomberman will kind of kick that bomb off in the direction that you're facing. But only if there's a clear path. You can't kick a bomb through an indestructible wall or even through a destructible wall. And that's Kick. Kick's pretty valuable. I love Kick as a move. One thing I did notice, there's no throw in this game. I will mention that now because we won't, it's not in the game, so I won't get to it later. But throw and kick are kind of pretty similar, except for throw allows you to kind of throw bombs over walls. In previous games and later games, when you throw the bomb, it'll kind of bounce. It'll even bounce over the tops of several blocks that are either destructible or indestructible. Pretty handy, especially at the beginning of the match. You can just pick a bomb up and lop it over the wall, and it works kind of like Mario 2, where if a bomb exits one side of the map, it will come back in on the other. So you can essentially attack somebody without even being close to them really early in the match if you can get a glove. The throw glove, I believe, is the what makes you throw. But anyway, back to this Bomberman. I get excited. I like talking about Bomberman. World 2 is Top Man, and this gives you dash in, is what they call it in the game, but it's basically just a run that allows you to run if you hold B. So it kind of turns Wario into Mario, where if you just hold B you can run, or even Wario. You can dash in Wario Land. And then World 3 is T-Bear, and this gives you the Trouncer, or push, as I like to call it. You can push enemies around. So if you're dashing or running and you run into an enemy, you will kind of move them over. You'll push them out of the way a little bit, which is pretty nice later in the game, especially if the enemy lays a bomb and you're trying to get out of there. You kind of push them out to get out of the way. Or you can even push them into a bomb that's exploding to take them out. So there's all kinds of strategies you can use push with. World 4 is the boss is P-Flower. He's like a little flower guy, and he spreads his minions out. When you defeat him, you get Liner, which gives you the ability to place several bombs in a row, which is pretty handy whenever you're trying to take out multiple enemies at once. Sometimes you can catch them in a group. You can send several bombs out in front of you, and it will just explode down through the aisleways, which is pretty nice. World 5 boss is Thundercloud, and this boss gives you Moto, or it's basically like a little scooter that allows you to jump blocks, which is kind of what you can't jump the destructible blocks. You can only jump the ones that are indestructible, which is kind of weird, but I kind of understand it at the same time. It's really meant for use like in late game whenever all the destructible blocks are gone and all you have are the indestructible ones left on the map. It makes things a lot easier when you're trying to run your enemy down or run away from your enemy when you can just start cruising over the blocks. And that's, like I said, that's it for the power-up, so it's a little bit light in that aspect. It is kind of different and kind of neat that you get these power-ups full-time. Really, Kick and Liner are the only ones I can think of that were in other games that used to be a on-map power-up, and now they're a permanent power-up in this game. The other ones are kind of new. New to this game. And even really, I don't remember them being used outside of this game, because dash in or run is replaced by skates as an on-map power-up. The more skates you pick up, the faster you are, which is nice because it helps you be able to get away from bombs as well. And then the liner is it's called like a multi-bomb. It's a pickup you can pick up in the map in other games. So the rest of these bosses you fight, you gain no power-ups, but they are required to beat the game. And World 6 is Puku Buku. World 7 is Gururin Knight. And World 8 is the last boss, and he is the Mad Bomber himself. It doesn't matter which character you choose at the beginning of the game, Bomberman or Wario, you will always play against the Mad Bomber as the last boss. And he will always have the head of Bomberman, the black Bomberman, in the game. So, that being said, it would have been neat if they would have put in a sprite of like a Wario in the giant mech looking suit thing that the Mad Bomber's in. And made him a boss if you're playing as Bomberman. I always thought that'd be kind of cool. But yeah, once you beat the Mad Bomber, you're either saving the world from the Mad Bomber if you're Bomberman, which doesn't make sense in the story sense unless Wario hired the Mad Bomber. I don't understand that. Or if you're Wario and you defeat the Mad Bomber, I guess Bomberman is the Mad Bomber, but he's still black Bomberman and not white Bomberman. And you've conquered the world, and now you're going to be even more rich as Wario. The sprites are actually pretty cool. I do like the sprite work in this game for Game Boy. Even it's still pretty nice. Even all the destructible and indestructible blocks have some different sprite work. Sometimes they're barrels, sometimes they're plants, sometimes they're just bricks like the normal Bomberman levels. They do a pretty good job working those sprites in, even on Game Boy. Looks really nice on my backlit Game Boy. I really like playing this one. So that's gameplay. And like I said, I could go on about just Bomberman in general, but that's all the main gameplay for Wario Blast. I don't have any fun facts, so I guess I will move on to the outro. So either I'm going to go ahead and say that I'll move on to the next game for the next microsode. It'll either be Donkey Kong 94 or Solomon's Club. Those were the two that got the next highest votes. I can't remember which one came in next, but you can look forward to one of those games in the next microsode. And we should be getting back to normal with a full-length episode of On Topic Retro featuring Super Mario Bros. 2 the following Wednesday. I should be able to get that show out to everybody by Friday is what my hopes are. But yeah, so come check out the show. And thanks for listening to On Topic Retro. It's a part of the Retrologic family of podcasts and an even greater umbrella of the Nintendo Dads family of podcasts. If you would like to send in your personal experiences for the next full show of On Topic Retro, but you're not in Discord, please send them to the ontopicretro@gmail.com email address. If you haven't joined the wonderful non-toxic Retrologic Discord and would like to, visit retrologic.games for details on how to join. It's free. Come join, come hang. There's lots of awesome people in there that like to play games, like to talk about games, and the more episodes that I put out about this, or the more episodes I put out of this show, the more you guys will see the love and the passion for specific games, but even all games in general, from our fine folks in our Discord, because that's usually where I get my hosts for this show from. But yeah, that's it for this episode, and stay tuned for more. I'll catch you guys later. Bye now.